Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil, catch a vibe today, with Cam Slater leading us all the way from the heart of the...
As you all know, I love a good cigar, and that doesn't mean Cubans, that means New World cigars. And I've got a mate, he's got a cigar shop, and he has a couple of clubs that you can join. One is called Passionados and the other is called Hemingway. Now, if you're new to cigars and you want to try some top-notch cigars, you can pay a monthly subscription, and each month Grant helpfully sends out a selection of cigars. This month he sent me 4 cigars, and these are all aged. So today in the humidor I have got what is called the Postani Wojek War Bear in Toro size, which is a 6-inch cigar, and it's got a ring size of 52. Now these are box pressed, but these cigars have been aged by Grant for 5 years. So this is going to taste absolutely mint. You can contact Canteros in the link below and join up for the Passionados or the Hemingway. Now, he hasn't paid me to do this. I'm doing this off my own bat because I think he is the best cigar supplier in New Zealand, bar none. Here we are in doing episode 23, and with me is Hugh Devereux-Mack from COLFO.
Very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. Now, we've talked a lot on the phone about various different things with aspects with firearms, etc. And we've got a law change that's coming up. And so I thought it would be a good time to get you on the show to talk to all of those firearms users, and maybe some people who don't use firearms are a little bit afraid of firearms for no reason in particular other than they don't know anything about them. But you're a pretty enthusiastic young fellow, especially where I'm looking at it from. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on how you got into this gun lobby business?
I think number one, we need to clarify, New Zealand doesn't have a gun lobby. The Council of Licensed Firearms Owners, or COLFO, is probably the closest we've got, but even then, we don't lobby for guns because, as you know, they're inanimate objects. We do lobby on behalf of the licensed firearm owning community. Yeah. So the people is what we care about and how they use guns. But when we think about how I got into this, I guess it started with my father when I was 6. I started rabbit shooting with a .22, growing up in that sort of environment. Then skipped through high school. I was a competitive shotgun shooter, and now I'm terrible at it, having taken a few years off. And
you never forget, though.
You never forget, but you do get a lot worse at hitting the little targets.
Well, you're doing 20s, not 25s.
Or you're doing, as I recently did at Nationals, 46s instead of 90%.
Oh, dear.
It was a humbling day, but Dad was happy. So then I did what everyone does, went off to university, and as the stats show, you kind of drop off from shooting during those times where you're flatting, studying, and broke. Then I transitioned into the working world, took a role with Deerstalkers, which got me back into hunting and shooting.
Yeah.
And now I'm back to owning firearms of my own, hunting, shooting. But also the COLFO thing came about as a bit of a surprise. So the organisation started when I was 6, so about 30 years ago as of this year. It's our 30th birthday. And originally I came into it after 2019, the Christchurch terror attack. I got really frustrated seeing police, politicians, and just the media beating down on licensed firearms owners and saying that our community was responsible for this terror attack, when we sort of knew very quickly after the attack that it had been a police failure. I'm sure we can talk about that later. And I just put my hand up saying, look, I want to help COLFO out by helping with their social media to tell the positive stories, the people like me who'd come up shooting with their parents, and telling the story of New Zealanders so that regular people who'd seen Christchurch happening weren't going to be afraid of our community and knew that we weren't the problem. Next thing I know, I'm speaking to a PR agency about what we could do with social media, and they say, so what made you want to be the spokesperson? My answer was, I wasn't aware that was the conversation we're having, and it came down to me or a couple of other candidates who were very politically minded and potentially wanted to go more into politics, where I personally can't think of anything worse.
You're on the same page as me there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a fun job. No privacy, long hours, and everyone always hates you no matter what you're doing. So I said, okay, I'll be the spokesperson. I've been doing that voluntarily since 2019, basically. And now I've had the privilege for the last 3 months of stepping up into a contracted role with COLFO, helping grow representation and the finances for them.
Let's go back to 2019 and Tarrant's appalling criminal behaviour. Entirely preventable. The commission came out, and I don't think this was highlighted by anybody in the media, and certainly by no politician, that the failures of Christchurch were almost entirely the responsibility of the police, and that the firearms community had acted responsibly and even reported this fellow, and yet he was granted diabolical liberties in his licensing requirements to start with. He didn't have anybody who could vouch for him other than online gamers who had never met in person, and everything was conducted online by the police with no sensible checks. Egregious errors that cost the lives of 51 people.
Absolutely. So I'm limited a little bit on what I can say about this because I was one of the individuals who was allowed to spectate in the closed coroner's inquiry into how he got a license. So I have a bit of knowledge into that, but we can't supersede what the coroner's report will say. But it aligns largely, from what I heard, with what we already knew right after it. The police had failed to vet this individual. They failed to do a proper background check. And I feel bad for the people who had been his character references because they were licensed firearms owners, and there was no way they could have foreseen this coming. But what it comes down to is, the police, they didn't just give him the license, they signed off on his ammunition, and I still have a copy of that document that was sent to me very quickly after it. And all of the law changes and everything we've seen happening to licensed firearms owners since then have been a result of the police failing, and they've never issued an apology to license owners. From when they stood up and blamed us, they've issued one to the Muslim communities who their actions or their failures negatively impacted, obviously. They've never acknowledged it. They've never apologised to us for demonising us in the eyes of the New Zealand public. And I think that's a massive oversight that I don't think it started the downfall of the trust and confidence falling in police.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I mean, I take myself, for example. I used to, go along with what the police said, and, the police have suggested this and suggested that, and I'd go along with that. Since 2019, I've realised the police are not our friend as shooters, as firearms owners, that very often the police break the law themselves in trying to wrong-headedly, in many instances, get a firearms owner. I've experienced the police breaking the law when they've interacted with me. For example, I had two police that knocked on the door of my house. They were armed, they had vests on, they had a Glock on the hip, they also had tasers. And they said to me that they were here to inspect my safe. Well, they were breaking the law right from the get-go there because they have to give you 7 days' notice. It's clearly in the law.
Yeah.
When I challenged them and said, you didn't give me notice, they said, well, we're here now. It would be better for you if you let us look at it. And they actually threatened me. Now, I stood up to them and told them to hop in their little car and drive off and follow the law. But there's a lot of people that would accept that. And this is why we see the police, they've done this outside my shotgun club, for example. They wait down the road, about a kilometre down the road. Anybody who comes out of the shotgun club, they then pull over, and then they ask them if they can look inside the vehicle to see how the firearms are stored, right? Oh, because we're just here doing checks, It's actually illegal. That's an illegal search, and a vehicle is the same as a premise, as a house. They have to give you 7 days' notice to be able to do it.
And the thing is, as you say, a lot of people don't have the confidence when dealing with police to push back on that. And that was the other one. Police have changed their attitude to licensed firearms owners post-2019. Usually you had community arms officers who sort of either retired or people that you knew and they had a relationship with the community. But since then, they've become very aggressive towards us and as though they are trying to catch us out to remove firearms. COLFO recently, I think 2 months ago, we launched a whistleblower feature on our site so people could raise issues that they'd had with police without fear of it coming back on their license.
Yeah.
That was the other one. People were afraid of calling the police out on bad behaviour because the section of the Arms Act currently, and proposed under the new one, which says an officer can use any information that they deem necessary to demand or to declare someone no longer fit and proper anymore. That's opened up a whole line of bullying for marital reasons, people getting mouthy with the cops are losing it for that. And so we decided to launch this whistleblower one so we could middleman for them and keep their individual licenses safe while addressing
The
police officers.
Yeah.
What we weren't expecting is we've now had members of police and the Firearms Safety Authority using that to report bad behaviour from within the organisation to us to help that COLFO can try and put a stop to it or make people more aware of it.
The Firearms Safety Authority has been in existence since the legislation enabled it, basically. It's like 2020, 2021 is when it really got up and running. So it's only been running for less than 5 years in full systems operation. But right from the get-go, it was the chief executive of the Firearms Safety Authority, hopelessly compromised, has now had to resign because of the cover-up that she was involved in as the HR manager of police in covering up Jevon McSkimming's, misbehaviours, right? Mike McElwraith, ostensibly the 2IC in there, he says one thing to one group of people and another thing to another group of people, and then denies that he said those two different things to each of the groups. The guy basically lies like a flatfish, has got the temper of a very short fuse. I set him off when he came to Antique Arms to explain the registration system, right, which is fatally flawed. It's just going to take a matter of time before it falls over. But he said, we raised a question with him, and he's up there in front of 200 members. We're the largest antique arms club in New Zealand. And he was there to explain. And he said, we said, well, what about firearms without serial numbers? He says, there's no such thing. Well, we're in Antique Arms, and we know that serial numbers didn't really start to take effect until just before, 1899, with industrialisation. Up until then, things like brown bess muskets were produced in their millions, not a single serial number in sight. Not even Martini Henrys.
Yeah, I was going to say Martini Henrys.
They don't have serial numbers either. And then this fool says to us, so what you need to do then is to choose the largest visible number that you can see on the receiver of the firearm. We all laughed at him.
My guess is that's the year they were manufactured.
Martini Henrys, and I've got 10 of them, right, in various different models. They have the date that the receiver was manufactured on the side of them, and it's the largest numbers there. I've got 5 Martini Henrys that have got 1887 on the side, and I consequently registered all of those as a Martini Henry, and in the caliber that it's in, and the serial number is 1887. Well, what use is a register if you've got 5 guns with the same number?
And there'll be more than just those 5 because other people have those firearms as well.
Exactly.
But you know what? If a criminal ever commits a crime using a Martini Henry rifle, they'll know which of the hundreds of doors to knock on because they'll know exactly where it came from.
I know, it's a joke. And then you take like Lee Enfields, for example, and many of those were taken apart and chucked in a corner and then reassembled into various parts and then disposed later, and then they've been mixed and matched. So you might have a serial number on the wrist of the rifle, which doesn't match the serial number that's on the bolt, which doesn't match the serial number that's on the receiver.
I mean, my first 308 that me and my dad rebuilt, it's got parts from 3 different rifles, 3 different serial numbers. When I called up Firearms Safety Authority to say, hey, which number do I use here? The one on the receiver, the one on the barrel, or the one on the sort of the floor plate of the magazine? They said, we want the one on the magazine. I said, but that's stupid. It's the easiest one to replace, remove, or get rid of. surely you want the action. They're like, no, we'll take that one. So I said, look, just if you have a note section, record these other two numbers, because it's important to me that I at least did my best, because it is a crime if this is recorded wrong. And if you come looking for a 308 and doesn't have that number because it was on the floor plate, I don't want to be in breach of the Arms Act and lose my license for it. And they said, oh, that seems a bit excessive. We'll do it after some coercing.
Yes, but we don't trust them anymore.
No.
Right? Because they don't tell the truth and they ask you to do illegal things.
Yeah.
You know, serial numbers is the other thing. Like, I wonder how many Ruger 1022s are registered with the serial number 10/22.
Thousands.
That's what happened in Australia. It's what happened anywhere a register has gone in. Model numbers get registered as serial numbers.
And what I'd make clear is I don't think it is a fault on the individual employees who run the phones and do these tasks, because a lot of them are...
Well, they didn't make the decisions.
Yep, they didn't make the decisions, and they're not well trained, and they don't understand firearms. They've been hired almost what seems like for their lack of experience, so that they can't push back against higher ups or support the firearms community more. So that's why they're so nice on the phone and helpful, but it's their higher ups and those making decisions that we have a problem with, especially with COLFO.
Well, especially when the police actually lie about statistics.
Yeah.
I mean, they say that particular law changes are required for public safety. And if you say to them, for example, then, all right then, how many people have been killed in New Zealand with machine guns?
None.
None. Right? No,
So why are you making restrictions on them?
Nobody has. So it's not a public safety issue anymore, is it?
No.
It's a annoyance level. It's a restriction level that we want to do it. The last time someone was killed with a fully automatic firearm in New Zealand was in the Bassett Road machine gun murder, but it was a submachine gun. But that's only happened once.
No, the interesting one was I have an OIA from last year which requested from police how many licensed firearms owners have committed crimes over the last 10 years, and it equated to 0.06% of licensed firearms owners had been convicted of a crime. Over half of those were driving-related offences. So if you took those out, and the reason I was looking into this was as we're putting together our arms bill submission, I wanted to know that the more restrictions they put on us as licensed firearms owners, let's say they were 100% effective and all gun crime by licensed owners was gone, what would that actually happen or affect the bottom line? It would affect 0.03% of the crimes committed by us, and of course none of the ones that are committed by individuals who break the law and go outside of the Arms Act completely. We've put that in our submission because when you explain that to non-licensed owning communities, they say, oh, but we've always been told if we restrict licensed firearms owners, the gun crime goes away and we get safer. I'm like,
Nowhere in the world has that happened.
Yeah, or even if it did, you'll get 0.06% safer. Great, and that's only of us, let alone expanding that out to all gun crimes or all crimes by violent criminals, which makes it even less.
I think the biggest problem we have with lawmaking in New Zealand is that the politicians actually don't know what they're talking about. In particular with firearms, they have no idea at all what they're talking about. And a classic example was the knee-jerk reaction by Ardern, who took gun grabbing to great glee and passed ridiculous laws. Like, for example, if you're a collector and you want to have a semi-automatic license, which I've got, and if you're a collector of military firearms, you generally want to have an SLR or an M16 because that's what the New Zealand Army has had. M16's a different kettle of fish from the SLR because the M16's fully automatic. The SLR's not. So that fits under the restricted category, or prohibited actually. They passed a law and said something's prohibited,
and then they still allow you to
own them. Still allow you to own it. So it's not prohibited, it's permitted.
Yep.
But that's what they called it.
And that's stuck too. That wording has been saying, oh, New Zealand has banned semi-automatics, we've banned fully automatics. Like, I keep telling people they're not. And I mean, you can even point to the 22s that are available that are military styled for fun, the Tipmans and things.
Yeah.
I show those to my sort of more liberal or anti-gun friends, say, these are all available. I open up my gun safe and show them things. And I didn't know you could have these. I'm like, these are not any more dangerous than any other firearm. The key thing is always the person. One bad person with 1 firearm is more dangerous than a law-abiding person with 100 firearms. It's always the intent of the user that makes the difference.
Yeah, and you can't control the intent. If someone wants to commit a crime, they'll commit a crime and they'll use what they can to do it.
I mean, look at Bondi. The individuals had undetonated bombs, or like bombs that failed to go off. It's like, are you going to
License those?
Are you going to license IEDs? Is that a path that we're going to go down? What about the trucks they use to get to the venue or to the location?
Well, I love how the Australian senator came out and said, well, we're going to ban belt-fed shotguns. And I thought to myself, you know what? We should just quietly agree with that, right? Let him do it.
Yep.
Ban belt-fed shotguns. Like, that'll make everybody safer. Belt-fed shotguns, awesome. Well done. Well done, you. Congratulations. We're in support. The firearms community is in support.
Stand on his side.
Yeah, we stand on your side to ban belt-fed shotguns. There isn't such a thing. It doesn't exist. And yet these clowns come out and say they're going to ban them.
As long as they don't come for my pack-fed hunting rifle, then I'll be really upset.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but take the so-called semi-auto ban. Well, they called them prohibited firearms, which they permitted you to have, but
and still do.
Yeah, but you had to keep they brought in this thing saying this will stop someone committing a crime. What we'll do is we'll make them keep a significant part, a separate at another person's premises from the firearm. All right, so I've got my SLR, the New Zealand Army SLR that I've got. It's in mint condition. I've worked hard to try and get hold of one in such a condition. Some of them aren't. I removed the firing pin. I put the firing pin with another licensed firearms owner. Well, guess what he's got?
The exact same in reverse.
Yeah, right? So he's got an SLR and he took out his firing pin and the firing pin's with me. So what did that achieve? Well, anybody who knows anything knows about firearms knows that either of those firearms are able to be used with the differing firing pins. The firing pins can't actually be seen. So even if you're a firearms inspector and you come around and say, "Oh, yes, prove to me that that's in a unfireable state," you say, "Oh, I've removed the firing pin." Well, he's not going to know.
No,
unless he knows how to remove the bolt, pull the rat's tail out, pull the pin out, and then establish whether the firing pin's in there or not. They're not going to know.
No. And my other question is, if those solutions, so to speak, are so hard for them to enforce that they're practically useless because you can just do that switch, why have that in legislation? And that's proposed under the new bill as well for collectors' firearms. And it's like, okay, is this making it less likely for a criminal to use these firearms? Is a criminal going to abide by these?
When has a criminal used a collector's firearm in a crime in New Zealand? I can tell you the last time that was. It was the Bassett Road machine gun massacre, right? And that was a collector's weapon. It was a fully automatic submachine gun, right? But that was the last time. When was that? That was in the 50s, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Something like that.
That was before my time.
Yeah, you weren't even born.
No, no.
Neither was I. So they're passing laws and coming up with scenarios that don't exist and that criminals, they don't follow the law anyway.
No.
So the laws are there to stop the law-abiding doing what they already do anyway because they're law-abiding.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
What I also find funny is we hear a lot from the opposite side of this Swiss cheese model, where they keep putting different layers in around licensed firearms owners, which supposedly stop firearm crime hurting communities. Now, we see that a lot from academics and things because the first layer they put in was licensing, then after that it was the register, and then it was the ban on semi-autos. Now they're proposing new ones, which are banning bolt-action rifles with detachable magazines, for example.
That's every Lee Enfield.
Correct. That's every hunting rifle in New Zealand, every Tika, every Bagara, modern ones, gone. Then after that, they're now saying...
For no reason. There's no reason why you would do that. I mean, if it's got an integral magazine of, say, 5 rounds or a removable magazine...
Yep.
There's no difference. The firearm operates the same.
And exactly the same one. The next one they're proposing after that is a limit on how many firearms an individual can own, following Australia, following UK, and all over. And now those layers of Swiss cheese are not going to affect the criminals whatsoever. I do actually support their model and their principle, but rather than applying it to law-abiding people, How about we put it on around the criminals, for example, things that could stop them getting guns in the first place, like searching shipping containers that come into New Zealand. A journalist 2 years ago did some report, and it was less than 7% of the shipping containers entering the country are ever searched. So
Yeah,
there's a source of them.
But they can't stop meth.
They can't stop drugs, which
Right.
always come in with guns as well.
Yeah.
Police do great work stopping drugs at the border, and they always find guns, yet somehow only law-abiding people are the source of criminal guns. I'm like, that doesn't track. But maybe other things you can do if they say that's too difficult. What about carrying a firearm while committing a crime leads to a factor in sentencing, and you can serve a non-concurrent sentence, so it adds time. Or maybe it's a attempt or preserves an intent to commit violence, either murder or manslaughter. So it makes the punishment for carrying those weapons a lot higher. Maybe that's a layer of Swiss cheese we could put there.
The punishment for poaching a fish is higher than the breaches of the Firearms Act.
Yep.
Right? It's ridiculous. You steal a fish like a trout. You go onto somebody's land, you illegally fish, you get some trout, you get pulled over on the side of the road by the fisheries inspector. He finds you don't have a permit, you didn't have access to that land, you're a poacher.
Mm-hmm.
They can take your boat, they can take your car, they can take all your fishing gear. There's no limit on how much they can take. Anything that was used to obtain that fish illegally is, or even a deer, right,
Yep.
illegally, they can take all of that. So your four-wheel drive, everything, the guns that were in there, all the rest of it. And then you get a massive fine or a prison sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But you commit a crime with a shotgun, there's almost no extra consequences for doing that. So we value a fish's life and a deer's life more than a human life.
Yeah.
And that's where it all goes wrong. I said this to politicians at the time in 2019. I said, you need to stiffen the penalties. I said, you don't need to do all of these cockamamie changes that you've proposed. You just need to say, if you want a semi-automatic centre-fire rifle, have an E-category licence and belong to a club. That's all you need to do.
Yep.
And they didn't do it. They ignored it. And now we're getting a rewrite of the Act.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, the premise for that already existed with pistols. If you wanted a semi-automatic centerfire, follow the same routine as pistol clubs do.
Yeah.
Not a difficult change, would have been equally effective. And yet they decided to go, well, the way they went, which hasn't helped.
Yeah, and then they've gone and spent $230 million on a register.
Yep.
And you can talk to anybody in the firearms community, and I'm involved with antique arms. There isn't a single person involved in antique arms that hasn't had an issue with the register.
We had one that came through on our whistleblower line of an individual who had Firearms Safety Authority call him and say, hey, we would like to inspect and see these 2 firearms that you have registered your name. And they described them over the phone, and he said, I don't know what those are. I've never owned anything like that. You can inspect in the sort of 7-day period, but I don't have them. When they did a bit of investigation, turns out he'd had the 2 example firearms that were on the website for the registration page on the police or FSA's website. They had been registered under his name. Which was just... And that was early on in the piece as well. This was, a year ago that we got that emailed through to us like privately, and now has been added to our database of things that are wrong.
But, I mean, if you just look at me, for example, I can list to you several instances where the Firearms Safety Authority have contacted me and they've been in the wrong every single time. But yet, whenever the media talk to them, it's always the firearms people. And, you know, a classic example is when they rung me up and they started off the conversation with, we just need to verify who you are. So they ring you on a number that's hidden. Mm-hmm. And they say they're from the Firearms Safety Authority, and you have to accept that as gospel. Well, I don't.
No.
I said
you shouldn't.
No.
Ever.
I said to them, well, first I need to establish who you are. And they got all shitty about it. And then after 20 minutes of arguing, and I've got time, so I do it, they then brought on a supervisor, and he said, well, why are you being difficult about this? I said, well, I don't know who you are. I said, if I was a criminal and I wanted to find out where somebody's firearms were stored, I'd ring them up and pretend to be from the Firearms Safety Authority and get them to tell me where their firearms are kept. You're doing that as under the guise of you need to find out who we are. Yet you looked us up on your system and you phoned me on my number that you had on your system. but I don't know who you are.
Oh.
And so I created a system right then and there, and people should use this if they get called by the Firearms Safety Authority. And I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you tell me something that only I know, right? So I want you to go and look up in the register on your computer right now, look up my Glock 40, give me the serial number of that, email that to me with the second and the fifth number of my firearms license, and you do it while I'm on the phone with you. And when I receive that and verify that it's correct, then I will have established that you are from the Firearms Safety Authority.
Yep. And they will have established that you are who you say you are because it's come through to the right details.
Correct. So I did that, and then the very next thing that came out of his mouth was that we're calling you about an illegal firearm that you've registered. And I said, this conversation is over, and hung up. Because they accused me of a crime.
Yep.
So their standard response when anything is wrong, right, anything is incorrect or they think something's incorrect, is to ring up the firearms owner and accuse them of a crime.
Yep. They blame you before looking internally.
So then they rung me back and they said, oh, well, we need some help with this. It's very urgent. I said, well, it wasn't urgent yesterday. It's urgent today. So it's on your desk. What is it? They said, oh, well, you've got an illegal firearm. Click, I hung up again, right? And then they rang me back and they said, why do you keep hanging up? I said, because you keep accusing me of a crime. Think about that for a minute and come up with the next response. He says, oh, we've got an issue with something that's on the register. We need your assistance with us. There you go, right? That's all you had to do. And it turned out that they thought that I had a fully automatic Ruger 1022. And I said to the person on the phone, you knew. Is somebody given you this? Go ring Cam Slater and wind him up. She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, anybody who knows anything about firearms, and clearly you don't, knows that even after 9.5 million iterations of a Ruger 1022, the 19th most popular rifle in all the world ever sold, and that's after Martini Henrys, Mausers, Lee Enfields, Brown Bess muskets. They're the 19th Ruger. That's one of the most popular firearms in the world. They've never made a fully automatic Ruger 1022. So the issue is not a me problem. The issue is a you problem. Your database and your system, because if you haven't registered a firearm, you might not know this, but you have to go in there and you put the make and the model, and then you select the caliber, and it also gives you a selection. Like you have to put all that in and then search the register for something that's in the database that matches that, and then you select it, and then you put in the serial number, and then it's registered. Well, in their database, in their system, when they loaded in a record for a Ruger 1022, some fool in the Firearms Safety Authority said that it was fully automatic.
Yep. And that's not unusual for mistakes in there. I had a similar one when I was trying to register my new Atika 7 PRC, the blackout version.
Yeah.
Now, I went to register that as Atika. They have two separate sections. They have Tikka and Sarco as a manufacturer. Yep. So I said, okay, I'll go through both of those. They didn't have 7 PRC listed as a caliber under either of them. So then I called them out and said, it isn't there. What do I do? They said, oh, well, you could just register it as like a 7mm08. I'm like, but that's wrong. That isn't my caliber, and that would make me in breach of the law for registering a wrong firearm.
Which they tell you in pop-ups on the screen, or if you ring on the phone.
End of the call.
Yeah. So if you've given us any incorrect information, you could be penalised with 2 years in jail. Blah blah. Blah. So you can't do that.
But then it went further than that, because I then very sort of snippily put out a bit of a press statement from COLFO saying, like, this is what's going on with it. They haven't got this caliber, and they're encouraging me to list it as wrong. Mike Micklewraith calls the chair of our board saying, oh, he's putting false information out there.
That's Mike in the rear with the gear, Micklewraith.
Mike Micklewraith. And then my chair's like, what's the explanation behind them? It's like, actually, it was worse, because a lot of people have registered, and I called up Beretta New Zealand to say, look, I've got this rifle. Can you confirm the manufacturer is Sarco, the model is Tikka? And going through that, and like, yes, that's how it should be registered in New Zealand. I'm like, and my model is this, the blackout. That wasn't there, but my Vale Wideland 308, everything else was there, but blackout PRC 7mm, not there. There are a lot of people who will have registered their Sarco-made Tikkas under the Tika is the manufacturer.
Model is
incorrectly.
T3.
Yeah, model is T3. And so that exposed a wider flaw in the register that they haven't really addressed since then, and I think they're hoping we've forgotten about. We're just a little busy at the moment to really make a point of it.
Well, when I went to register my Vickers machine gun, it comes up and it says magazine.
Oh, it's belt fed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't go past it.
No.
Right. And they say, well, how many
What's your
rounds?
capacity?
What's your capacity? Well, I don't know. How long's my belt?
Or technically one.
Yeah. How about the whole 9 yards?
Yep.
Right. Like, I mean, this is the ridiculous thing. They're wanting a box magazine, removable box magazine for a Vickers machine gun. Had the same issue with the Browning machine gun that I've got.
Yep.
Right. It's belt fed. How many rounds? How long do you want the belt to be? Right. It can be 5. Could be 200. Could be 1,000. But that's what they do. And the system won't let you progress past there, so you actually have to enter wrong information. So I just put 10,000, for
just
the
whatever the max. Because
Yeah.
you can't put 0 in there either, because it has
No.
to be a number between 1 and X.
Yeah. So I put 10,000. But, the trouble is that there's so many errors in the system. And again, I bought 2 pistols at an auction. So now, for those who don't know about firearms, pistols are a restricted item. There's already a register for pistols. Even if you're a collector, it was in the register as a collector's item. These were 2 of those. They're 2 famous pistols, actually. They were involved in a very high-profile crime in Wellington where John Barlow had killed a father and son. He had disposed of the gun that he used, but when the police arrested him, they found these 2 pistols hidden in a clock.
Oh.
And they've been kept together and they're sold together, and they've got provenance as being the 2 pistols that were involved in this murder trial. And they came over at auction, and no one was bidding on them, so I
Just take them because they're there.
Yeah, I bid, and I knew about that crime because I lived in Wellington at the time. But I go to register them, and I noticed that on the permit to possess, that they had one of the pistols listed as a Beretta 1934 in 7.65 millimeter, and so I looked that up, and they never made Beretta 1934s in 7.65 millimeter. They made Beretta 1935s in 7.65 millimeter. So that pistol with that serial number was recorded with an incorrect model number in the register. It had perpetrated in the register until it got to me. And then I said, well, hang on a second, I can't load this into the register as a model 1935 because I don't have a permit to possess that.
Yeah.
And that would have raised a red flag, and then I would have been in breach of the law, and the first thing they would have done is ring me up and accuse me of a crime. So I rang them up and I said, I can't register this gun because you haven't given me a permit for it. And the permit you've given me is for a gun that doesn't exist. So you've given me a permit for a gun that can't exist. It's never been made. And I want you to correct the permit. Well, that took an hour of deliberation and callbacks and arguments with the Firearms Safety Authority.
And money. Money from the taxpayer paying for that inefficiency.
Yeah, because they had it in the system wrong. Again, it was a them problem, not a me problem. I was just insisting that the law be followed. And they wanted me to record that incorrectly.
Yep.
Under pain of penalty, which could involve jail or a significant fine.
Yep. Or at the least losing your right to own firearms as a no longer fit and proper person, which they'd love to get you for, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure they'd love to get me for that. But, there's all sorts of inconsistencies that occur within the firearms community. I was a referee for somebody for a collector's license, and the vetter came round and interviewed me and asked me why I thought this person was a fit and proper person to collect firearms. And I said to him, well, I don't have to make that decision.
That's not on you.
It's not on me, it's on you. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you've already determined that he's a fit and proper person to own firearms because he's got a firearms license already.
Yeah.
There's no provision in the law. There's, in fact, no description in the law for what is a fit and proper person. It's a subjective thing. And I'm not required to do anything about it, so I'm not going to give you an answer. And he got all upset because I refused. I said, well, It's the same thing as the question that you asked me about what's your definition of a bona fide collector, and I gave you the dictionary definition because the law doesn't actually define what a bona fide collector is. It doesn't. In laws, at the beginning of every law, there's interpretations.
Yeah.
Go and look it up. There's nothing about collector in the interpretation in the Arms Act, and there's nothing about what a bona fide collector is. It's not even mentioned. It's mentioned twice in the law, and that's it.
We were actually discussing this on our executive meeting last night regarding the new arms bill, for that as well as gunsmithing. There's no definition of New Zealand of what makes a gunsmith because we don't have any formal qualification or anything. We do have armourers, I guess, who've come out of the military, but by nature of not defining what a gunsmith is in New Zealand, every licensed firearms owner kind of is a gunsmith because we can modify our own firearms to an extent.
Yeah.
Depending on your own personal capabilities with a lathe or other tools.
Well, let's talk about this new act, right? We've got the ACT Party telling us this is the best thing since sliced bread. But the people I've talked to who have been hardcore ACT supporters are now very disappointed about this rewrite because it largely seems to be almost the same as what was there before, with some extra little weird stuff in there that you start to think, well, maybe a lawyer who's involved in the firearms, in doing firearms cases has written this to ensure that he's got a steady supply of work.
Yeah, so I think where I sort of stand also, and I guess where COLFO stands is, we've always been massive supporters of Nicole.
Yep.
She's definitely one of our community. She's an expert in the ownership of firearms, how to safely use them. She's an educator. All the like, she's the best spokesperson we could have in those halls fighting for us.
She actually knows what she's talking about.
Exactly, and she cares about getting the right answer and the right solution that helps balance public safety with the individual rights to have firearms. Now, where we struggle is the fact that ACT is always going to be a minor party. They are always dictated to by whatever national and their coalition partners do.
First rule of politics, learn how to count.
It's the yeah, exactly that. It's the numbers. So I think what has happened here is we were promised this big full rewrite of the Arms Act completely from scratch, and that hasn't occurred, which understandably will disappoint a lot of the hardcore supporters and maybe even turn some people away. My counter to that is, of course we are going to see some watering down of it because of their position. There are some positive things. Getting police out of it completely in the operations, that is a big win because, as we've said, and we can touch on later on, I've got some whistleblower stories here. The police themselves, and as you've said, are not friends of licensed firearms owners.
No.
Some of the officers are licensed firearms owners themselves and are aggrieved and annoyed by what they're being told and ordered to do. Members of the firearms safety community, the authority, are coming forward with what they're annoyed that they're being tasked to do. So the individuals themselves can be good people. Nothing against them. They're doing their job. They're getting their rent paid, whatever it is. However, those who are making the decisions and telling them what to do are not friends of us. One of the stories I have in front of me that came in this morning was a member of the FSA who's basically said they are using historical stories of people who've had written warnings as justification for modern warnings, maybe 2 or 3 years later, to take people's license off them, suspend them, and revoke them. Their counter is, if you got let's say a speeding ticket or a drunk driving thing from a few years ago, and that was dealt with by a written warning,
Yep.
and then over 12 months has passed, they shouldn't be able to bring that up as a future one, saying, well, 4 years ago you also had a written warning, we're going to apply that, and it shows a pattern of behaviour, and therefore it's going. A pattern is, you know what, you got 50 speeding tickets for breaking the law in a year. That would have a little bit of justification, but 1 or 2 in 4 or 5 years?
But speeding tickets and things like that are summary offences.
Yeah.
Right? They don't even count on your criminal record.
No.
So they shouldn't be used in as an excuse to take away your firearms. In the antique arms, we're hearing stories all the time of older members, often in their 70s or 80s, who don't really use computers, getting completely bamboozled by the whole
Registering
registers
wrong.
thing.
Really easy to do.
And then the police say to them, well, if you can't do this rather simple task, you really shouldn't have access to firearms, and actually physically encouraging them to give up their firearms and give up their license.
Yeah, I can do you one more. They've been taking them off. An individual came to us. He is a clay target shooter in his 80s.
All power to him.
Yep. And the thing is, he doesn't even own or use firearms. He just wanted to coach the New Zealand team. He can't coach the New Zealand juniors member anymore because he's had his license suspended after a medical incident happened to him. They've said he's no longer fit and proper, but because his license is suspended, revoked, he's not allowed to use or touch firearms or be around them. So he has less rights than someone who avoided the system completely. So now in New Zealand, I believe, that junior has pulled out of the world competition because he hasn't got a coach anymore. That guy was not a risk to society. He wasn't a risk to himself or others. We've lost a competitor for this. For what? What safety gain, what justification was it, except police and the FSA at this case decided to push it. And he asked for help, and the bodies that he approached decided to write a letter but would do nothing to support him financially to fight it, which I think is a very common thing in the firearm circles, that the individual organisations are they're territorial over their membership list. They see other disciplines or other organisations as competition, so they might not support them as much as they could, and they want to protect their own little slice of the pie and hope they don't get touched.
Well, you touched on that at the beginning of this discussion, where you said there's not really a firearms lobby, and that's my experience too, is that you might have COLFO, and it's got these subsidiary bodies that are members of COLFO, like the NZCTA, the Clay Target Association, Pistol New Zealand, Small Bore. And look, credit to some of those organisations for what they do, especially the Small Bore rifle people. They sign up more new members, younger members, than any other organisation that's out there. They just don't retain them.
No.
But they're getting them through the door, and that's admirable.
Yep.
But what all of those organisations do, particularly those that are Olympic sports, is they don't support the broader, lobbying that's required about firearms laws, because as long as the changes don't affect them, they're not interested. Yep. And Pistol New Zealand and Clay Target, in particular, are the worst. They sit there and say, well, we're an Olympic sport, they're never going to ban us, and the law changes don't affect us, so we're not going to say anything. And actually what they need to be saying is, we're in this all together, and the politicians need to take advice, and they need to coordinate with all of their member their members, to mobilise them to be vociferous. And be stroppy and be strident, because that's what's worked in the United States.
And it's really funny, because having talked to, and you'll know this from Antique Arms and all the other communities and things you're a part of, licensed firearms owners are stroppy by nature. They don't like being told what to do. They always want to stand up for themselves. But the moment it comes to doing something beyond a comment section on Facebook, suddenly that's too difficult and I can't be bothered, or it's not going to affect me. Now, these organisations, Pistol, Clay Target and things, they may be doing quiet communications in the background to their members to get them to submit on the arms bill and things like that. But doing things quietly in the background, and COLFO has learnt this in the last 3 or 4 years, there's a lot that can be done quietly and progress that can be made behind closed doors. But if you want to make a change and grow the sport, you need to be public and out there. Our big challenge has been, we used to be, when we started, an association of associations. So Clay Target, Pistol, Deerstalkers, they all paid a levy per member to fill the coffers and help us fight legal cases and protect the sports for everybody. And that was sort of a really good model while it worked. But then we hit this weird peacetime before 2019 where there weren't really any major changes going on, no one felt threatened, and we were just continuing as per normal. So although COLFO as a body continued, the funding all dried up and people just let their payments lapse. Now then 2019 hit and suddenly we were caught scrambling. That sort of kept on for a year or two, then that died away again, and now we've been reliant on donations from amazing sponsors who've come through and recognised the problem we're facing. But there's a period where I think it was 5% of all gun owners were supporting the major organisation fighting for their rights as gun owners. Now, if we had 20% of the 232,000 people donating $5, we'd pretty much be a multi-million-dollar organisation that could fight every legal case that comes our way. We could host more political events, and we could actually start doing things to grow shooting sports and creating... I'd love to see us offering scholarships and support for clubs wanting to attract more young people into the sport. But we can't do all that when we're broke.
Yeah.
So we're transitioning at the moment from a completely volunteer-run, sort of semi-club funded association donations thing into a membership organisation that is both, I guess, the lobby, for lack of a better word, but also a sporting club. So offering benefits to members. The first one we've come up with is what we've called our Sentinel membership. So we've heard all the stories of people losing their licenses with FSA and police coming after them for non-criminal reasons.
Yeah.
I've been on the receiving end of that personally. But I was fortunate enough, I knew a good lawyer in firearms through COLFO, but not everyone has that. People know housing lawyers, they know like criminal lawyers and things. Firearms law is really specific, as you said. Even the new one is the same. So COLFO said for $99 plus GST a year, our members will have one of the COLFO firearms lawyers step up and defend them during that 28-day period of suspension to prevent the revocation. Now, that serves two purposes. One, it gives us a foundation of membership to grow and create a full-time lobby group that supports members, but it also gives police and FSA a check so that they may slow down on trying to go after people for non-criminal reasons, knowing there's resistance now.
See, that's what the NRA does in the United States, right? They've got insurance schemes in place. If you get this happen to you, the NRA will step in and fight for you.
Yep.
They also have insurance for firearms and all of those sorts of things. But if the NRA gets involved in your case, you know they're going to fight.
Yep.
And they've told politicians, if you're going to support that law, we're going to make sure you lose your seat. And then they set about and do it. And that's what I think is missing from this firearms community. Very often they're very lackadaisical and being proactive about something. There would be, if you did an analysis of members or firearms members who pay a levy somewhere or some sort, or a member of a club, there would be significant numbers of firearms owners and licence holders in electorates where that MP's majority is less than the number of members or firearms licence holders. And so we need to be mobilising those electorates where there are MPs that are vulnerable because of their low majority, and we've got more firearms licence holders in that electorate. And say to that MP,
hey, you need to pay attention.
You need to pay attention, or your majority is going to disappear overnight, because we're going to mobilise all of these people and they're going to vote against you. And if we started doing that, we'd only have to take out one or two MPs over a couple of election cycles for the politicians to start waking up that 232,000 voters,
plus their family and associates,
and everything else, probably, let's call it 500,000 voters, is enough to cause us significant damage. We're not going to do that.
And not only that, the financial backing, like hunting and shooting, not a cheap sport. So there's generally some capital there that can be leveraged.
Well, firearms are like good cigars, right? They aren't cheap.
No.
Right? They're not cheap. They're very enjoyable.
Yep, and they smell great.
And they smell great, right? But they're not cheap. And so there's very few less well-off people that are involved in the fire, especially if you're doing clay target shooting, right?
At Nationals recently, I was talking to an individual about the Sentinel membership. I was like, how much is your firearms license worth you? Because if it's $99 plus GST a year, that's not a lot. It's like, oh, that's kind of a lot of money. As I looked at him with a DT-10, a $12,000 shotgun over his shoulder, having spent $1,000 of travel and $500 on ammo for the weekend, saying $100 is too much. And I was just like...
Well, that's what I say to antique arms. People go, oh, the annual fees for antique arms are $120. It's too much, we need to reduce it. So hang on a second. You've got 57 M16s. You've got M60s, you've got an M2 machine gun that's worth $30,000, and you're bitching about $120. right?
The funny thing is, those same people who say we will not support this financially are the first ones in the comment section. They're the first ones emailing me or calling me on a daily basis saying you need to do more. My first one is like, are you a member? Because we support everyone. I don't care if you're a member or not. If you're a licensed firearms owner, we're on your side. Period, point blank.
So it's the same attitude the AA has, right?
Yep.
If you call them, we're going to help you, and hopefully you'll become a member.
Yep. And I mean, we will help everyone. We do prioritise members when things are stressful. But at the same time, I am one person, and we have Steve, who's a volunteer doing the secretarial work and helping respond to messages. I don't know how many hours a day I spend on the phone just helping people with, oh, my neighbour's been a little bit uppity, I've had the council round, our range is closing because of lead-based poisoning or like RMA concerns. All of these things, we're happy to help. And so when we say, give us $100 to help preserve not only your right to have firearms, but the next generation to grow it, it's just deeply frustrating to hear how blind people are in thinking it's that, oh, it won't affect me. Then it does, and suddenly they want to call the insurance company because they've crashed their car and they're in trouble. I'm like, sorry, that's not how this works. If you want us to continue and you want us to grow and do more, pay us. Like, help us, and we do.
But it's the same thing with affecting positive firearms law changes. I've been discussing this ad nauseum since 2019. I said, if you don't engage professional lobbyists and pay them well, you won't get the result that you desire. You'll get the result that other people desire. And that's exactly what we've seen happen. Everyone said, vote ACT because they'll protect us and they'll pass this new law and they'll remove the register. And we had people at Antique Arms who weren't registering or buying anything at auctions or even going to the gun shop to get ammunition or black powder or whatever. They weren't doing it because if they did that, then they'd have to register stuff. And so they've sat back and thought that the register was going to disappear.
Yep.
And I've been saying to them ever since it came in, it's not going away.
No.
The only way that the register goes away is if it catastrophically fails. And the only way that you can make it catastrophically fail is to put it under stress.
Yeah,
by loading it up with heat. Comply. Right?
Over-compliance is a really good tool for us.
Comply, and then start OIAing how many people have got, how many firearms are registered with the serial number 1887.
Yep. The interesting one is, so we had an FSA whistleblower contact us saying that their phone system, so everyone knows their phone system is broken, old, slow. They don't have callback functions. They don't have as you said before, we'll text you something to confirm that you are who you are and we are who we are. Yet they had 47 people online who were waiting. Half of them had been waiting for more than an hour, and members of the FSA staff who were not on the phones were having personal conversations with no sense of, the guy quoted, no sense of urgency or care for the system. They were just clocking in, clocking out. Understandable, they're there to do a job and they're probably not particularly well paid. But the register will fall over if all of us comply. Now, I think that the online transfer of firearms between users, now that doesn't exist. They're slowing down the process of being able to register those by doing it on the phone. If I was them, and I'm not saying this is what's happening, I have no information as to what it was, but if I was a strategy person within FSA and I wanted to slow down the rate at which the register fails, I would only make transfers available by the phone. I wouldn't do it by the internet because then transfers would come through a lot faster, errors would be quicker to build up, and it would make it seem more successful and delay it until, let's say, 5 years down the can when everyone's registered.
But, I mean, you know,
Would be a good strategic delay.
nobody sat down with, I mean, the FSA is young, all right? It's a new organisation, and yet it's having to go through a review at the moment for its culture because there's, appalling bullying going on.
Yep.
There's all sorts of nasty stuff that's going on in there, and the organisation's barely been stood up.
And I think that's because they've still imported the police culture. We likewise have whistleblowers from within police, similar ones. We have a licensed firearms owner who's been in court case that he was a senior member of police. He was involved in an incident and developed PTSD from that. Police.
Oh, that's been well publicised, that case.
May or may not be the same one.
Yeah.
Either way, he was fighting them on a employee disputes one, and when he refused to testify, they then said, oh, well, actually, if you can't testify because you have PTSD, then you're not right to have a firearms license. So then they took his license off of him, and he's been battling to get that back.
So they tried that with me. There was an arms officer in Manukau who was a stroppy, annoying person who carried a clipboard and acted like he was God's gift. He came round to interact with me and another guy about some kids that we were coaching through the Young Enterprise Scheme. And he said, these things that you're selling are firearms. Well, they weren't. We were making line launchers, right, for fishermen.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right? And he said, no, I'm going to confiscate those. I said, oh, well, do you have a Gazette notice for that? No, why? He says, I've deemed them to be a firearm. I said, well, are you the Commissioner of Police? No. I said, well, then you can fuck off. Right? Because the only person who can deem whether something is a firearm or not is the Commissioner of Police, and he has to gazette it.
Yep.
And secondly, if you're going to confiscate these, you have to come and pay full market value for them.
Yep.
No, I don't. I said, well, what part of the Act don't you understand? And I pointed this all out. And then the next month I came up for a renewal.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it took 6 months to do the review, to do the renewal. And I went up and visited him at Manukau. I said, I'm just checking on where my renewal is in the process. And he looked at me and he walked over and he says, oh, it's here on top. And now it's not. And he slid it into the bottom of the pile. And he said, that's for causing me problems. I said, you haven't heard the last of this. Right? He doesn't work for them anymore. But the last thing that he did to slow down the whole thing was say, well, you take antidepressants, and so we don't think you're a fit and proper person to have a firearm. And I had to go and see a forensic psychologist, pay something like $1,500 for a report saying, well, taking away his firearms license is the last bit of enjoyment that he has.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the level of pettiness that exists out there amongst particular arms officers and things that are out there. There's no actual rules, and I mean, they come to my house and they look at my safe and they go, oh, you should be storing this shotgun, and it's a competition shotgun, right? And over and under shotgun. He says you should have the 4-stock taken off that, and I said.
Based on,
I said, based on what? He said, oh, well, we've got these guidance notes. And I said, look, I'll tell you what, I'll comply if you can show me in the law where it says that. Well, in these guidance, I said, I don't care about your guidance notes. I want to see what the law says for a start. And then, you know, oh, you've got the bolt in those rifles in the safe. I said, of course I do. They said, well, you shouldn't do that. Why? It's in the safe. And I said, those are rare collectible rifles, and those bolts go with that rifle. I don't want a drawer full of bolts running the risk that I could put the wrong bolt into the wrong rifle, because that's how you kill people.
Yep.
Things blow up because the head spacing's different or whatever. Oh no, well, our guidance notes. Well, stick your guidance notes up your ass. Yep. What's the law? And this is the problem that I've always had with the police and with the Firearms Safety Authority, is they don't follow the law.
I have 2 things on my gun safe. One is a sticker that says, I do not have the time nor the crayons to explain this to you. And then I have a copy of the Arms Act. So if they come back again, I say, hi, point it to me and I'll comply. And I think, the other one is a copy of Nick Taylor's advice as to what to do when the police come knocking.
Yeah, I've got that, a copy of the Arms Act, and then I've got stickers on the outside of the safe that say warning explosive. Because I've heard of the police going around and using
power tools or things to break in.
and things to break into the safe. Well, the best way to stop that is tell them there's powder in there.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad call.
And they won't do it.
Yep.
Right? But, you know, it's frustrating. It sounds like a bunch of whingers, but, you know, the reality is the police know less about firearms than most of us in the firearms community, particularly in the collectors.
Because they're less invested. What happens to them if they do something wrong? We know there's a shortage of police in New Zealand. They're not going to get fired over a small infraction. But for us, if we don't know the law backwards and forwards, we get prosecuted and we lose our firearms, ironically.
Yeah.
It's like, right, so we are incentivized to know more about it, and I'd love to see a similar level of, incentive put on officers to do their job and be good at it. Because we want officers to be good at their job and knowing the law, because then it would make us...
Well, the Firearms Safety
better,
Authority,
safer.
they send people to go to the auctions to process paperwork. You know, the last auction I was at, I bought a Browning machine gun. I go there to get the permit to possess, and the guy says, and what magazine does it have? I said, it's sitting there in front of you. What do you think it's got?
Yep.
Go on, give us a clue. He said, I don't know. I've never dealt with firearms before. I'm thinking, how did you get the job?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, you've got to feel a little bit bad for them, because they've been sent into this environment with experts like yourself, completely unprepared, no training, and then they'll be blamed by the authority when things go wrong. They'll be scapegoated for it.
See, that's why I insist that they do everything in writing with me, that I dot the I's and cross the T's and they comply with the law, because the penalties for getting it wrong is they'll come after me first before they'll go after their own people inside that have created the problem.
I've recently learnt my cell phone allows for phone calls to be recorded on my end by tapping a button. Encourage anyone who has that availability on theirs to do the same, because they record everything for training purposes on their end, but it's a disproportionate level of power, and they
what people need to know is that the law in New Zealand says that you can record a phone conversation as long as one of the parties to that conversation is aware that it's being recorded, which is you.
Which is you.
Right? You're aware that it's being recorded, so you're entitled under the law to record a phone conversation.
And it's a slightly adjacent one. One of the things that we were asked recently in a conversation by anti-guns is, what would we advocate for police to be to make them better at their job? And I was like, body cameras would be a great start, but then allowing us to record things. And the other one is proper training, because police keep banging on they want to carry pistols and firearms as part of their everyday wear and strapped up all the time. They're strapped up every time they come visiting licensed firearms owners, more often than not, following 2019. I've never seen one approach my door unarmed anymore.
You know, the funny thing is, though, is they wear Glocks, right? Now, I've brought a Glock to this interview, because there's a few things I wanted to talk to you about.
I've been terrified of it this whole time.
Oh, no, it's sitting
I've
on
just been waiting for it to jump up at me.
Yeah, it's sitting on the table and it's innocuous, but I've got a Glock here. It's a 9mm Glock. It's similar to what the police have. A standard Glock magazine that the police have holds 17 rounds. That's why it's called a Glock 17. Right? It actually holds 18 if you put one up the spout.
Yep.
I know of serving police officers that only put 6 rounds in the magazine.
We've had similar reports through from serving police officers that say because of the weight they don't want to fully carry them.
They don't like fully carrying a loaded Glock, so they only put 6 rounds in the magazine.
It's heavy though, Cam. It's really heavy.
This little thing, it's hardly heavy. You know?
The other one, an interesting one I've also seen is, I feel bad for them because, likewise, they're being deployed to carry them with a lack of training. And as we saw in the Bondi ones, the officers who responded during an active shooting...
The ones who were well-trained.
The ones who are on site and carrying firearms and yet did not engage the individual. Now, I've heard the counter-arguments like, officers are meant to keep the public safe, and they were doing crowd control and getting people out. That's a valuable job, and they were waiting for the armed offenders to arrive, the ones who are specially trained to deal with those scenarios. I'm like, okay, if you are going to do crowd control and your job is to get people away from it, and you are not specially trained to deal with that, then why are you carrying a firearm at all? Is that not the purpose? If you're not going to use one because you're not trained enough, then you don't need to carry one.
I used to do a bit of training with pistols. We used to get police officers that would come to the club to learn how, because they weren't trained enough.
No.
Right? And they would come there, and the first thing I'd say to them is, if you are pulling that pistol out of your holster, the very next thing that needs to happen is you need to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you've got a very short metal club in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to help you.
I also know that the training in New Zealand, from what they go through, the Marlborough Pistol Club, police used to train up there. I think they used to leave their targets behind. They started collecting them because the local pistol club
Would
used
mock
to
them.
collect them and just mock them for how bad their accuracy was. They've also had reports of pistols left on venues and guns left behind after training
Look,
sessions.
I've heard police mock pistol club owners. They go, "Oh yeah, but they're using downloaded, rounds. They wouldn't be as accurate if they were using full-powered loads." And everyone I know who shoots 9mm is buying factory ammo.
Yeah, because
Right.
it's cheap and
Because
affordable.
it's cheap and affordable. Right? They're not loading their own. They're not downloading them, not doing anything. The difference between a pistol club owner and a police officer is a pistol owner has had to attend that club at least 12 times in
Yep.
a year, once a month, and put rounds down range. And there's absolutely no substitute for rounds down range when it comes to using firearms.
Yep.
And I used to shoot pistols competitively, when I was a lot younger, before I went to university and became a statistic.
Yeah, happens. It's
Right.
expensive.
It's an expensive sport, right? It's like people say, it's very dangerous having, machine guns. People licensed to have machine guns. I said, well, machine guns are heavy,
Yeah.
right? Like say an MG42, a German machine gun from World War II, it's heavy, right? It weighs 6 or 7 kilos, and then on top of that, it's really, really long, and then you've got to add in the belt, and the cyclic rate of those machine guns is such that if you fire it for a full minute, right, then you have to be very wealthy to do that, right? Because they fire at 1,200 rounds per minute. So you fire 1,200 rounds, that's $3 a round.
Yeah.
So you've just spent
mortgage, yeah.
$3,600 for a minute of fun. Now, you can't shoot them in New Zealand anyway,
No,
under
the collector's
the
rules.
collector's rules, but that's where the logic starts to show you that it's ridiculous that they've got these laws. You can own a racing car with 1,000 horsepower and take it out to a licensed circuit and race it around and do insane stuff with that car.
Yep.
You own a collector's firearm, you're not allowed to use it.
Yeah.
You just have to look at it.
And the thing is, I was talking to an individual who had they owned a 50 cal bolt action. They loved shooting it. Again, expensive for every round. I think it was like $20.
$20 or $30
every time you pull the trigger. So stupid amount of money involved, let alone the cost of the gun. And he sold it because there are no ranges that he could shoot it because there are very few 50 cal rated ranges in the country anymore. So that now lives down south somewhere. And it's just, okay, I understand that there is always going to be an area or an element of public safety. But for these things, if you're on a dedicated range that's rated for everything else and you're a fit and proper person and you can afford to do it, what's the logic of saying you can't use this?
See, why doesn't the military open up their ranges to the public, say 3 times a year, even quarterly?
Yep.
So if you've got a machine gun, today, this weekend is World War II.
Yep.
Right? And so you can go along with your Vickers and you've got, 600 or 700 rounds in a belt.
Yep.
Sit there and tap away with your Vickers machine gun.
Do it as a fundraiser for the RSA, anything else.
Anything.
And they'd make a killing. People would do that.
Yeah.
The other one I've been a big advocate for, and I've been asked a lot, it's like, okay, you're against a lot of changes and things. What are some positive changes you could have that would improve safety and relationships between police? And I said, well, how about we do joint investments between police and civilians to create ranges where both teams can, like, very similar to what the States have with indoor shooting ranges.
Yeah.
So it's as common as a golf driving range where both police and civilians can train next to each other, like communicate and have that. Don't just have police only days where they're isolated. Have them as regular members having to regularly attend and mix with the people that they're policing.
Yeah.
That wouldn't just improve our ability to have a relationship with the individuals who are policing us, but it would mean they shoot better as well and they can get advice. And I've never gone to a gun range and shot and not had someone come up and offer sometimes unwanted advice, but advice of how to improve.
But you see the police using firearms, right? And now with the advent of cell phones and cell phone cameras and things, you see it a lot more. I watched the police with pistols, with Glocks, holding it in a way that is inviting a jam. Holding a pistol on its while it's on its side, like that, right? As he's looking around a corner, right? Everybody knows that you hold a pistol vertically because the case comes out here. If you hold it like this, the case can go up and down.
Yep.
Right. But that was what the police officer was doing as he was looking around a corner. Well, he hasn't got a sight picture. He hasn't got, he wasn't holding it correctly. He wasn't, doing any of the things that you need to have, that anybody who's handled pistols regularly would do. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's also got behind him, I could see other police moving in his
so he's flagging them.
In his line of sight, right? So the chances of a police officer hitting the bad guy, that he's very marginal, and killing one of his own on the other side, higher, because it's not going to get stopped by the criminal.
No.
So it staggers me that these people are allowed to run around with firearms, often unlicensed. They don't have licenses.
No, they don't. That's another one. I was considered crazy, and it was said that it was unrealistic to expect that all serving officers who want to carry a firearm as part of their uniform have to have a firearms license. And that was for two reasons. One, make them like us, so they have to follow the same rules and they understand it. But also, we don't say, and they're like, but it's not precedented. It's not my driver's licenses. In order to be a cop, you have to have a driver's license to drive a car. You can't just not have a driver's license and be allowed to operate a squad car. So why is it different for firearms when one is significantly more dangerous?
Exactly.
But apparently that's unrealistic.
Actually, cars are more dangerous than firearms.
Yep, statistically completely right.
Right? There have not been more than 300 people killed in any single year with a firearm in New Zealand, even in 2019.
Yep. And yet... we could get into statistics of things that kill more people in New Zealand than firearms, and even when you factor in the
obesity,
even when you factor in the per 100 population, still higher.
Yeah.
But getting back to the current laws and jumping to what we currently have is, I agree with you, a watered down version. Some hard fought battles have been fought and lost.
But there's new crazy things. I'll give you an example, right?
Yep.
This is the magazine for the Glock, for a standard Glock, right? Holds 17 rounds. But Glock also makes a 32-round magazine. Under the proposal, 34 actually, no, 32. 32-round magazine. Under the new law, this is going to be illegal.
Yeah.
This is not.
Yeah. So
unless you have a permit for this, which I do, because this has got a serial number on it, which is another ridiculous thing.
Yeah, serial numbers on magazines.
This is a piece of plastic, right, with a spring in it. Everything else is plastic, yet it has to be registered with a serial number.
Yeah.
This is a piece of plastic with a spring in it, but it doesn't have to be registered with a serial number. Why does this not have to be registered, but this does have to be registered?
Don't give the anti-guns any more ideas.
Right.
And that's another thing. People don't want to bring... The new arms bill has exactly that with the magazines as an issue. And we've asked for clarification because we don't know if the permit to own the larger magazine is included as part of your BCAT endorsement for pistols, or if that's a separate one. We've said if it's separate, that's completely stupid. But no regular person who is either a standard ACAT license holder or a criminal should have a larger capacity magazine without a license, because what are you using it in? But that doesn't make sense to make it a separate endorsement. So that somewhat makes sense, but if they put it individually, why is that even there?
See, I don't use this pistol.
No.
Because I don't have a B license. I have a C license. And I happen to like collecting Glocks. But when you collect firearms, you also collect things that go with those firearms, which is why I've got this and another couple of these longer magazines, because I collect things that are made by Glock.
Yep.
Perfectly legitimate. But now under the law change, they're going to take away that.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Oh, of course, yeah, because B. Yeah.
Right? And so that can't be put, because I'm a collector and that's registered to me, I can't take this magazine and lend it to a friend to put in his Glock 17 that he happens to have a B license for, because it's mine.
Because it's your one. And the funny thing is, how exactly do police police that? And it comes back to a conversation we had earlier about bayonets and import permits and things. If a law is unpoliceable and unprovable, then why have it as a law? If police ignore rules and licensed firearms owners obey, because we always do, and criminals obey them, it's like, to me, that suggests the law is badly drafted.
Well, bayonets is a good example. Right now, I also collect kukris and weapons from Nepal. For whatever reason, I don't know, I just like kukris. Now, I can buy any kukri in the world and have it couriered to home, no permit required. I've got several kukris, the blades are longer than 12 inches long. Some of them are almost 2 foot long, right?
Yep.
They're razor sharp. They will take off an arm, a leg, or a head if you want.
That's what they're designed for,
That's what they're designed for, right? I'm probably New Zealand's largest collector of kukris in New Zealand. I've got some that are from the 1860s, very rare kukris, but I can collect those with no restrictions at all. If I want to collect bayonets, and I do collect bayonets, and I want to import a bayonet, and some bayonets are not in New Zealand, or you see one and you go, wow, okay, if that's in good nick, and that's one that I haven't got in my collection, I'll like to order. Bayonets are restricted weapons. So kukris with a 12-inch or 14-inch blade, not restricted. Bayonet with a 6-inch blade, say an M16 bayonet or something like that, very small bayonet, you require an import permit to bring that in. And I've imported a fair number of bayonets over time. Some are very long, like sword bayonets for a Martini Henry. They're pretty fearsome looking bayonets, but they're all the way down to a short bayonet for an M16. It's one of the short, or an SLR.
Yeah, which are basically knives.
Basically knives. M16 has got a double-sided blade, so it's sharpened on both sides. But an SLR bayonet isn't. But you need an import permit. Now, every bayonet that I've imported, I've had a permit for, because I follow the law. That's what the law requires me to do. I've bought the bayonets and applied for the permit on the same day, and the bayonet may be coming from the UK or the US or whatever. In 99 times out of 100, the bayonet has arrived, sailed through customs, been delivered to my door by the courier before the import permit arrives. So you've got to ask the question, these are restricted weapons that are restricted by law that require an import permit. Yet customs doesn't stop it. They don't require me to produce my permit. I've got a permit for them anyway. I'm quite happy. Even if it was delayed, the permit coming through by a couple of weeks, I can go and collect it at customs and produce the permit. But I've never once been asked to do that. It's just sailed through with no restrictions. Why do we have to have an import permit for bayonets? It's absolutely ridiculous.
No.
That's extra paperwork that the Firearms Safety Authority has to process.
That we have to pay for.
And they sit there and say to us, we need to review the fees that you pay. And you say, well, okay, well, if you review all of the paperwork that we have to comply with, you might find that instead of filling out 37 pages for a firearms license, we could get by with 10. And compliance costs would go down, and then you would not have to charge us those amounts that you want to charge us.
Especially for renewals.
But they won't do it.
Like renewal paperwork. I'm about to go through my one for later this year.
Condolences.
I'm dreading it because, let alone the fact that, I say back in the day, the last time I went through, I guess, a renewal, when I was 26, having had my license since I was 16, it was a relatively straightforward process. The arms vetters were really nice. They came through after work hours, so it wasn't a sort of a burden. But now the costs are going to increase, and they're only meeting within Monday to Friday work hours. So if you have a job,
an inflexible, if you have
a job, or your referees
Who wants the police to come and visit you at work?
No. And the other one is, or having to explain that when you're a private person, you don't want maybe your colleagues to know that you have guns because maybe they're, as I was, living in Wellington, a little bit more liberal, and I kept that on the down low, despite my public appearance now. Or you have referees who have, likewise, jobs and they can't take half a day off work because you don't know what time the vet is coming or whatever else. It's like, we are looking at increasing how much we pay for the service for a reduced service. And yet we should say, thank you, we're grateful for this.
Well, that's the whole thing.
Sorry, it's a privilege.
But
it's
that's
a privilege
the whole
to be us.
attitude that we're told. Be careful, it could be worse.
It's getting worse.
That's just a threat.
It's been getting worse for years.
That's what Mike McElraith does all the time. He says, it could be worse. Well, do you want it to be? You're going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Because you like to do things in tiny increments. So we're literally like the frog in the pot being cooked by boiling the water.
Yeah.
We don't notice it's getting hotter and hotter. And we're the bad guys, always the bad guys.
But the funny thing is, licensed firearms owners are falling for it. When you look at the water's starting to get heated up, it's like, oh, well, semi-autos have got to be banned.
It's all right, I don't have those. So I'm okay.
Oh, we need to bring in a register to keep an eye on it. It's like, oh, well, I mean, I guess I don't have that many guns, so it'll be okay. Oh, maybe we should start looking at banning bolt actions. Hang on a sec, that's getting a little warmer. Maybe we should restrict how many guns everybody has.
Yeah.
Maybe under 30s should have firearms licenses that only last 3 years. Maybe all licensed firearms owners should only have 5 or 3 years on their license. Maybe no one under the age of 10 should be allowed to use guns even under supervision. These are all increments, and these aren't things I'm making up.
Those aren't things that you're making up.
No,
those are what the anti-gun people
want. Those are
want.
quotes from the anti-guns. And I'm so grateful that if anything, this arms bill consultation has brought up is they've laid out exactly their game plan and what they want for New Zealand and the future of firearms ownership. It is single-shot rifles or ones without removable magazines. And maybe less. Well, Australia went to 4 firearms. I can't imagine them wanting us to have more than that. And I'm like, cool. If this doesn't motivate every licensed firearms owner to make a submission...
I don't think I've ever had less than 4 firearms, ever.
I have a modest collection. I'm over 4. And I've only at that level because I couldn't afford to buy more.
I've got more than 4 of one type.
Yep.
Right? I've got Martini Henrys from Mark 1s to Mark 4s and everything in between, and there's 4 different versions of Mark IV, so I've got one of each of those. Or in actual fact, I've got 2 of most of them because there's always a better one and you've got one that you can trade, right?
I've realised I'm dragging the average down because I know I'm scrimping and saving at the moment because I know I need to buy a 22. I haven't got a 1022, which means I'm letting the side down there.
Oh.
I know.
You get a fully automatic one. I know someone who's got one.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you hook me up with that? It's a joke, FSA, it's a joke.
Yeah, Tarquin and Sebastian who are listening.
Yeah. So I've got that one. Then I've got a competition shotgun for clay targets. That's on my list.
What have you got?
I haven't got one.
You haven't got one? What do you want?
See, I was looking at maybe a silver pigeon.
Why?
I've always just loved them, and I used to shoot really well with them.
But they're not competition guns.
Yeah, but I'm good, or at least I used to be.
Get a DT11.
Yeah, but money, Cam.
Oh.
Still broke working for a non-profit. So a DT11 would be great.
I've got a DT11. I haven't shot it yet, so I am...
It's spoiling away.
And I've got a TSK stock on it as well.
And then the other one is...
Just in case people want to know, that's 20 grand's worth.
Yeah.
Right, a shotgun. That's a competition shotgun for shooting clays, but boy, it shoots them beautifully.
I know, and they feel good shooting. I went to the Beretta Open Day the year before last when I was working with deer stalkers. And I had a lot of fun shooting guns that I cannot afford.
Well, the DT11, the best thing about a DT11 is when you close it.
The snap?
Yeah, it just goes click like a it's like a Mercedes door.
I know.
You know, but when it
trust me, I know.
The sound that click
day.
makes, right? And then you just know that when that comes up to the shoulder, it's going to fit, and and that clay's going to be smoked.
And the other one I'm looking at is a duck gun because now I've moved to Christchurch, which isn't particularly good OPSEC on my half, but now I live in Christchurch. I've got a lot more opportunities to hunt and shoot.
The village of the damned.
Oh, hunter's paradise. So few people, so many mountains, so many animals.
So what are you going to get for a duck gun then?
I was looking at one of the Black Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
I tested them out on a goose cull recently. Every Waitangi weekend, we did a goose cull down in Central Otago, which was ironic because the crops we were protecting, and I used to love telling my vegan friends in Wellington this, we were protecting their crops by shooting thousands of geese every weekend. And their look was like, but why do you have to kill geese? I'm like, because they eat your food.
Yeah.
And they're like,
What people don't understand is the Canada goose eats as much pasture as a sheep.
yep. And they mess
And
up the waterways.
And they come in, there's like mobs of 200,
Yep.
land on your pasture. That's good night for the pasture. So the farmers hate them.
Yep.
And they're now classed as a pest animal, so you can use any means possible to kill them.
I have, when very frustrated after having one fly over me and blow a stalk on a seeker, I have unnecessarily drawn a bead and shot one with a 308. And it is the most, it was just sleeping on the riverbed next day. And I was like, you know what, I'm not going to see anything this afternoon. This is it. No, it was
You know
so
what I hate
satisfying.
more than Canada geese?
Grey legs?
No, paradise ducks.
Oh, yeah.
Like, especially
will
when
bust
you're
you.
out hunting, they'll bust you. If you're on a stag, they will bust you and they'll squawk and they'll do it till the stag's gone.
They don't just fly past and leave. They circle you and you're just like,
And honk.
yeah, just consistently. And I've never felt a level of rage.
Them and spur-wing plovers.
And Kias. But at least Kias are cute and they're native and they're sort of nice. But they will still pester.
The spur-wing plovers are Australian and they're a pest animal.
Yeah.
I shot one with a 22-250
Oh.
at 100 yards. All that was left was its wings.
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah.
But, people don't understand that there are pest animals in New Zealand.
Yep.
Right,
That need
and-
to be managed.
And they need, and geese in particular are very hard to shoot.
Yep.
Right,
And
they
they're
are
smart
cunning.
too.
They're smart. They know when they can sniff out a trap.
They hear the helicopters coming when they're being shot from shotguns from the air, so they hide and bury under the... There was one opportunity, we were walking back to the vehicle, so we'd shot a field line of us, did a really good job, and we were walking back along the path. Two people walked past, and the third was like, does someone want to get that one? There was just a grey lag who just buried on next to the path and was just sitting there, so someone grabbed it and gave it a spin. We were just like, yep, these things... No one was going to get that. They're buried in warm grass. Thermals won't get them. Shotguns won't get them. You just have to physically walk them down and shoot them in order to control their numbers.
Yeah,
And you can't do that without
it's
guns.
the same with goats. Like, there's a couple of places down Taranaki that we go, and we usually go with 4 or 5 of us, and we've all got bolt-action rifles, right? So,
Yep.
so we're the perfect example of what the anti-gun people want.
Yep.
And they said, oh no, only pest controllers can have semi-autos, blah 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 blah.
They
all
don't
of that.
recognise pest control is done by recreational hunters.
That's right. So we go down, and we have regularly come across mobs of 40 or 50 goats, right? And there's 4 or 5 of us, and we're all good.
Yep.
Right, and we've got systems that we use. Those of us with moderated firearms, we open up first so we can get a couple of extras.
Yep.
Once the other unmoderated ones go, the goats go in every
Oh, yeah,
direction.
they
Now,
scatter.
of that 40 or 50, the 4 or 5 of us might put down 20.
Yep.
Right, and the rest are gone into the bush.
Which is something... So I did a lot of the guides for... So COLFO has a free guide for the consultation up at the moment that people can download, and it'll give you the main talking points. One of the ones I'm really happy putting there, and I put it in out of spite, to be fair, when I saw that the anti-gun mob were coming for our bolt actions, I said, you know what, it's time that we stop playing defense and being grateful for what we're given and start pushing back. So I've got in there that, you know what, for A category firearms, we should be allowed semi-automatic hunting rifles, not MSSAs, hunting rifles with non-detachable magazines, so we can start dealing with these mobs. Because we're seeing in the press and the papers saying, oh, goat and deer numbers and pigs are out of control and we need more. I'm like, yep. Have you maybe considered that when you took semi-automatics away from recreational hunters, that contributed to us not being able to manage them?
Down in Rotorua, I've got a friend who's got a farm in Rotorua, and it's overrun by wallabies.
Oh, they'd be fun to shoot.
But you got to shoot them at night.
Yep.
Right, so it's dangerous for a start.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to work it out in defined ways.
Yep.
They very quickly bolt.
Yep. And they're fast.
And they're fast.
And small.
The best way to do it is to get in close with a shotgun with buckshot, right, and tip them over with that. But then you're not getting all the ones that are further away watching it all carry on, right? And if you had proper semis and proper setups, you
Yep.
could get an awful lot more and keep that under control. But oh no, guess what? Wallabies are now out of control in the Bay of Plenty, and in fact, they're now leaching over into other areas, and very quickly the whole of the North Island is going to be overrun with wallabies. But oh no, we know best,
Yep.
and we need to stop people shooting, or make them have single shot rifles.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And that's my big thing. I'm like, I might not agree with the whole consultation thing, and I know that we've had problems with them in the past where, I mean, the one after 2019, that was a joke. No one in Parliament read 3,000 submissions or whatever it was over a weekend.
Well, they ignored them, and this is the
Yeah.
issue that I have with submissions, right? And I say this to people, why are you bothering submitting? You're just encouraging them to ignore you. And this is where I see that the firearms lobby needs to be strengthened, needs to be cohesive, needs to be one voice speaking, and that all of the, you haven't got the pistol people saying, oh, it doesn't affect us. You've got the shotgun people saying, we need to have that, and we need to actually take some political heads.
Yeah.
And then people will realise that, yes, this is a lobby not to be messed
Yeah.
with.
And COLFO's realised that exact same thing, which is why I think they've agreed to, for whatever reason, trust me to help move them into this next phase of trying to unite every different shooting discipline under one flag to push for a united change. It was good getting Nicole in there. That was a good start, but she needs support elsewhere from outside the halls of Parliament. I'm done with the defence. I'm done with just bleeding things to anti-guns for no point.
It's good to hear. That's why I wanted to get you you on the show.
And
I think the Sentinel idea is a good idea. And what we'll do is we'll pop a link in the text below, so that people who want to get some protection can sign up and get some protection.
And we're working to build that as well. So I'm already talking to insurance companies about, as you say, getting firearms insurance against fire, theft, and loss, sort of that, and then more discounts and deals and people being brought on. So we thought Sentinel was the first step that was easy for us to do. Now, what people might be surprised is I convinced the board to get us to do that internally and self-fund it.
Yeah.
Because no insurance company would touch it because of that line, which is police can revoke a license based on any factor they see appropriate. That's just too much bullying or risk for insurance companies. So screw it, we'll do it ourselves. I think as things develop and as we grow, I've said with 2,000 Sentinel members, we get a full-time gun owners lobby. At 5,000, we can hire an internal lawyer to fight everything that comes across our desk. And that just changes the game for us.
It's a massive game changer, and it's one thing that I'd recommend to viewers and listeners. If you own firearms, if you have a firearms license, for $99 a year,
it's the best.
It's peace of mind.
It's less than a packet of hunting ammo. But not only that, so as we look at the political environment, we know from the Firearms Safety Authority stats, the majority of firearms owners are 50 to 65 plus. That accounts to about 70% of all gun owners.
Yeah.
Under 30s is marginal. Under 20 in their 25s and younger, it's hardly any, which means we have this golden era where we can turn around firearms ownership and start investing to. If we can't fight the anti-gun people with the number of voters, average age of New Zealanders or average top end of New Zealand males is about 85 is how long we live to. If we're sitting in that 50s mark, give us 25 years, and if 70% of us all drop up, we're going to be a fringe sport with no real political one. We're going to see the Olympic sport starting to lose traction and people saying, oh, maybe shooting shouldn't be in the Olympics. Maybe we're done with that.
Yeah, you want to go in the Olympics with shooting sports, you have to spend a lot of time surrounded by empty shells.
Yep.
Right? It's the only way. You know this as a shotgun shooter.
It's expensive, and I was grateful for Dad
It's a
fundraising
very
that.
expensive sport, and the people who are involved in this sport and involved in collecting have got very expensive collections, and they need to front up with some cash
And help
to
protect
empower the people who can help protect them.
Yep. And we're willing. I mean, when people ask how do we know it's not? And this is a valid question. How do we know you're just not enriching the members of COLFO and things? And how do we know the money's actually going to it? And there's two answers. I got asked that at a Deerstalkers meeting. I was like, fair enough, actually. One, we're a registered society, so we publish all of our accounts, and our AGM is open to all of our members. So you can come along, make your voice heard. My number is everywhere, so people just call me and ask. And then the other one is I've been a volunteer since 2019, always making myself available, building, because I genuinely care about the community and making a difference. I'm young enough that I can still be doing this for 15, 20 years, which is terrifying when you think people swap jobs every 2 years. But there's nothing else I'd rather be doing, even on the really bad days where I've had people say, my son has been paroled to me after he's turned his life around, but police are taking my firearms off me. Or another one was an individual had been the victim of a serious assault and they'd moved home to be home with their father to be kept safe. Police raided them and took their guns and said he can no longer have guns. Why? Because he might have taken revenge for that individual, or that individual might have got access. All of those stories are heartbreaking to hear, and they're more frequent than not. So I'm like, I genuinely care about it, and I think the best thing we can do is build a really strong advocacy group that can then build the next generation of hunters and shooters. Like, I want my grandkids to be able to hunt and shoot freely in New Zealand. The way we're going with our numbers, we're not going to make it.
No.
And I'm one of the least affected by the firearms law changes. I have bolt-action rifles. As you've heard, I want a semi-auto shotgun and an over and under. The law changes that get to me, I could make do with 10 guns and be happy with what I want to do. And there'll be more animals and less shooters. So I'm negatively incentivized for shooting sports to fail, because then there's more out there for me. But I don't want that.
No.
And as much as people struggle with it, the COLFO committee and the members who are on it, they want the exact same thing. They want shooting sports to grow, but they've all been volunteers, and balancing that with their regular lives, everyone's like, you should do more, and they've wanted to, they just haven't had the ability. We're starting to have the ability, and we want to keep that going.
I think COLFO's lucky to have you. And
Thank you.
We've just used over an hour and a half of time talking about this, and we could go on for more and more, but we can't. So it's been great having you here.
No, it's been a real privilege getting to finally meet in person. You're not as mean as everybody says you are.
I mean when it comes to the things that affect me, and firearms laws affect me, and so I can get very mean about that.
As you should.
And I've got a big voice, and I intend to use that big voice to affect changes, and you've got a big voice too. So between the two of us, I think we can probably make some changes. We just need to get a few more people on the same wavelength.
Agree, and there's 232,000 of us now. I'd like to get us up to 250,000 again in a few years, and if we can just keep that growing, shooting sports looks different for us, and let's get back to having the best gun laws in the world, bar none.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time, Hugh.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good old catch a vibe today, with Cam Slater leading us all the way.